Today on Inside Utah Politics, Utah's flag law hits a snag. How state leaders are reacting to these new official Salt Lake City flags. Plus, the future of the Utah Republican Party, what the two chair candidates' visions could look like in practice. And Utah Lands could help fund the government, the proposal that made it into the budget on an 11th hour vote.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics with Lindsay Aerts.
Well, thanks for joining us today. I am Lindsay Aerts. Let's go inside Utah politics. Well, Salt Lake City leaders appear to have found their way around the state's new ban on pride flags at government buildings. Mayor Aaron Mendenhall unveiling these flags at the council's meeting this week. You'll see there the pride flag, the transgender pride flag, and the Juneteenth flag, each adorned with the city's sago lily. Now, the council approved all three of these as new official flags for the city, meaning people across the state can fly them wherever they want. The mayor says this isn't a big change, just a way to comply with the new law.
We proposed these flags today to stay in compliance with HB 77. These are flags that we have traditionally raised at Salt Lake City Hall over the years, recognizing these days that promote diversity, they promote awareness around historical significance in this community and beyond.
Well, the flags have caused a bit of a ruckus in state politics, with the flag law's House sponsor, Trevor Lee, asking, quote, does Salt Lake City really want to play these games? Well, I'm joined today by the bill's Senate sponsor, Senator Dan McCay. Senator, thank you for being here today.
Always a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Okay, so first and foremost, just your initial reaction when you heard that the city was going to do this. What did you think?
If you watch the interviews, you can see that Mayor Mendenhall knows what she's doing. This is like a giant troll job of the legislature, which is fine, you know. The hard part that, you know, the rest of us are waiting for Salt Lake City to be taken seriously on homelessness, on crime, on, you know, the fact that businesses are trying to do everything they can to depart downtown. And meanwhile, the mayor is raising property tax and playing cute games like this. And, you know, if you knew the mayor, and like I do, you can see throughout her interview, she knows she's on a talking point about we're complying with the legislature, but the whole time she's chuckling and thinks it's hilarious, which, okay, hopefully at some point we look forward to Salt Lake City taking some things seriously. Did
they find a loophole here, or do you believe they are actually in violation of state law?
I'm not going to get into the semantics of what the bill says and what they should do, what they shouldn't do. The spirit of the message is clear. In Salt Lake City, it is becoming where they are recognizing minority voices in their minds, but at the same time excluding a portion of their population and doing everything they can from a community standpoint to not include them. And it's hilarious in my mind when you know, if I was going to laugh at something, you look at what they've created as far as their community values and the flags they're going to fly, because they say a lot. Look who's not represented, right? There are several. Represented? I think if you look at those flags, there are several communities that are not representative. I don't know, the Hispanic American population, the Polynesian population. Go down the list of the populations in the state of Utah that are not represented there, and I would just say those groups have been, quote, marginalized as well. I feel like that term is sometimes overused. But in this situation, no one looks at the flag array of what Salt Lake City says and feels like that's serious.
Well, to your point, I was going to bring up that marginalized piece, because these are groups that feel disenfranchised, they feel marginalized, they feel like people don't hear them, they feel like policymakers are legislating against them. Why should they not have some support from a capital city?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the community measures that they go through with community groups, making community space available, letting people have their own protests or their own, you know, events and those kinds of things on public space, all that stuff is merited and warranted. The problem is when the government becomes the speech giver, right? It no longer...
Do they not have free speech as a city?
Oh, it's not necessarily about their free speech. It's the fact that they think that they're only speaking for the people, you know, they're speaking for a limited group and ignoring other people in the process. That's where the government and these political debates, cultural debates, all those other things, they belong in the debates in the chambers, not flying from outside the buildings. But, you know, we disagree on that. It's not the first time I've disagreed with something silly that Salt Lake City has done.
Every time I talk to some political insiders about this, it's sort of like we're waiting for the legislature to clap back. What do you think the punishment, quote unquote, will be here?
It's May, all right? The laws just became effective. We're just getting to the point where we're recovering from the last legislative session. One thing I love about the legislature is it takes time for the right policy to percolate. Obviously, the city feels like they've got their policy and they'll smile and giggle in interviews for a little while. But there will be, I'm certain, other efforts to make changes.
I want to play this other clip from Mayor Mendenhall. She talked about not wanting to sow division. Rather, these flags were about inclusion, right? Let's take a look at that.
These flags are about inclusion, acceptance, and unity. That is what they're about. And those are the values of this city. And I believe they're the values of this nation.
So is she sowing division in this decision? Or, you know, like she says, is it really about inclusion?
I would argue that she owns division and has done a lot to create division. But that's fine, right? The voters have the right to choose what they want to represent them or who they want to represent. I think that's great. What I'd say is when you get elected a majority with those voices, you're creating a different minority. And while they may be in a majority throughout the rest of the state, at the end of the day, when you look at what you're creating in the environment of the voices that you're entertaining there and ignoring everybody else, there is a way that you are standing out to try and create division. And I can't really say I agree with the mayor on much, but I do know that her heart is in the right place. I just don't think her politics, as far as using the majority's control of the outside of a government building to then be the propagator of her speech, I'm not sure that's the right way. Can you imagine if the legislature came up with a MAGA flag, because it doesn't say any political party on it, and just decided to put a MAGA flag up on the Capitol just so the people in the avenues could enjoy the view of the MAGA flag from the Capitol? We wouldn't do it. It's inappropriate government speech. And I would argue it's just as inappropriate in this scenario as it is on the city-county bill.
Are you not using your majority speak, though, majority in the legislature, to create this policy in the first place? And for lack of a better word, it was a culture war to begin with. The whole reason we're here is because you guys passed this bill, you sponsored it, got it passed.
I would argue this culture war, the culture war or whatever, has been going on for generations and never goes away in Utah. In some ways, it's amazing to be, decorated from outside. Everybody outside of Utah talks about how great we are and the amazing accomplishments we have from an economic standpoint, from a opportunity standpoint. Minorities and everybody have the greatest opportunity in the country here in the state of Utah to excel. And I look at those successes, and you see Salt Lake City wants to constantly kind of rib the culture war, when at the end of the day we're doing everything we can to make sure everyone is successful and not just a limited few or whatever it may be.
This was not a culture war to begin with in your mind, this bill?
Oh no, this is anecdotal background noise to a much larger stream of conscious. This was fought out in the 2024 presidential election. It was fought out in the 2020 presidential election. Go all the way back. I think every president I've ever been part of there's been a culture war and component to everything. Think back to George Bush and Dick Cheney. Their major push when they were first running was against gay marriage, right? And those types of elements, and the Defense of Marriage Act, all those things were culture wars. That stuff all of this is symptomatic of a larger divide, which is some are interested in seeing a progressive way of lifestyle, where everything goes, and others are saying, let's stick with traditional American values. I happen to be on the traditional American values side, but at the same time, we all get to live together. I had great conversations with members of the city council before and after the vote. We'll be friends despite the fact that we disagree on this issue.
But you're calling them American values, kind of simultaneously discounting the Americans who believe differently than you, while arguing for all to be included.
No, I'd say America is a theme of opportunity. It is not a theme of designation. We as Americans, and the values that I believe are American values, I believe that we should get to a point where we live up to what Martin Luther King challenged us to, where we're judging each other by the content of our character and not the color of our skin. The other values, the progressive values, are focus on skin, focus on race, focus on marginalization, focus on those things to the exclusion of the other. And I say focus on everybody because the rising tide floats all boats.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there for now. State Senator Dan McCay.
Happy to keep talking.
I know we could go round and round about this. I appreciate it. Although I will say a special session is likely this year at some point. We're hearing rumors of May. We're hearing rumors of September. But to your point, do you think the legislature will take any action on this issue coming up in a special session?
Way too early to make that consideration. My gut would say give it some time and let's see how things play out. Hopefully Salt Lake City will realize just how silly. I'm just, if I take off my personal hat or take off my elected hat and put on my personal hat, the designs they came up with for these are just terrible from a flag design standpoint. So
well, to your point,
get to a good design standpoint.
You called them a troll.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So they didn't really put much thought into the design. They just wanted to troll, in your mind.
Absolutely right.
So.
And I would say, congratulations, mission accomplished.
All right, we'll leave it there. State Senator Dan McCay, appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Well, still ahead on Inside Utah Politics, the future of the Utah Republican Party. What's at stake this week when the GOP meets for their annual convention? Stay with us.
Watching Inside Utah Politics with Lindsay Aerts.
Well, welcome back. The Republican Party just days away from a convention that could decide the direction of the party for years to come. Incumbent Chair Rob Axson hoping to fend off a challenge from former Representative and gubernatorial candidate Phil Lyman. Well, I'm joined today by former GOP Chair Thomas Wright and Rob Axson, who is running for that position. Want to just note that we did invite Phil Lyman to join us today. He declined to come on today. So, gentlemen, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Rob, let me start with you.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what's at stake for this election.
Well, first, thanks for the invitation. Good to be with you and talk about the Republican Party. I'm a big believer in the good and the potential for good that political organizations can be in political parties. And obviously, specifically, in my opinion, the Republican Party. What we believe, what our platform is, I think can be a force for good for years to come here in Utah. So what's at stake is, in my opinion, it's really what's the direction that we're going? Are we building a party that will be relevant for years to come, that will impact generations? I've got kids from 15 down to 6. I want Utah to be the best place to live, not just during my lifetime, but during their lifetimes and someday during grandkids' lifetimes. I believe that the Republican Party can help deliver on that, to make Utah what it needs to be and to rescue our future. We have to grow that apparatus. We have to build the relevance. We can't be doing purity tests. We can't be limiting the size and impact of what the party can do. And so that's the case that I'm trying to bring to the delegates of Utah.
I want to get to that purity test comment you just made in just a second, but Thomas, let me ask you, can you elaborate a little bit on Phil Lyman versus Rob as a candidate? He can't say this about himself, but you're, out there. You can say whatever you want.
It never felt better to be a former Republican Party chair than right now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to comment on the race because I've been asked to chair the convention for the Utah Republican Party. And as such, it's important for me to remain neutral so that the delegates can come in, feel like the person running the meeting hasn't picked a side. But Rob has done a great job as chair, and I've watched him as chair, and I appreciate his efforts. It's a thankless job. It takes a lot of time away from your family and from your career, and we do it because we believe in what it espouses, as Rob said. So I appreciate his service so far.
Okay, interesting. We'll watch what's at stake. What I see at stake is a little bit of a faction of the Republican Party. You sort of have this populist wing, and then you have a more, centrist wing, a more mainstream Republican wing. Do you sense that, and how do you bridge that divide?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got Republicans that are barely Republicans. They've just maybe come into the party. They're getting to know what it means to be a Republican. Maybe they agree with all of our platform or just elements of it that excite them. On the other end, you have folks who have been Republicans for years. They're very entrenched. They know what it means to be a Republican. They love the platform. That's kind of where you're at in the spectrum. But then you also have style. You have some that their style is inclusive and collaborative and building, and you have others that their style is more to find those people who agree with them and build that. I think there's a role for all of that. We need all elements of the party, those that bring whatever talents they have. We fill in one another's gaps. There's some things that I'm very good at. But the opposite is true. There's some things that I'm not good at, and you need people to build it. We, luckily, here in Utah, have a big team. We have over 950,000 Republicans. We need to lean into getting the most out of them to promote and fight for the principles that we believe in. I do think that you have to bridge those divides. You need to make sure that everybody feels welcome at the table. And there's always going to be somebody who's disgruntled here or there, but by and large, I think that we can set a table that is broad enough, that is welcoming enough, that we can rise to the top together, building with one another.
To your comment earlier about purity tests, though, there is a proposal from the delegates to potentially strip members of the Republican Party of their membership if they decide to gather signatures as a candidate for office. The delegates have often been seen as a group that punishes signature gatherers. Do you support this?
So I can't speak to the specific proposal because I will be chairing that part of the meeting in all likelihood, and you have to be fair from the chair's position. But I do think that we shouldn't be afraid of dialogue and debate. And when delegates, then they all have the right to bring something forward. It's pretty low threshold. I think it's 5 co-sponsors and 1 delegate could propose anything, and it ends up on the agenda.
But there's only, forgive me, 8 agenda items with the Constitution, so it's not like 4,000 delegates are bringing forward proposals. There's 8.
Yeah, there's just a small handful, and so I think it's great to have those discussions. Let's talk about the pros and the cons of each of these proposals. I for one, have always been a believer, again, that we get more off of bringing people together than chasing people away. And so I would hope that the dialogue is such that we try to find the best outcome where we can adhere to the principles as laid out in our party platform, pretty straightforward and pretty simple, and figure out how to impact more Utahns' lives in a beneficial way with those principles. Anytime that we're doing that, I think we're on the right track. When we kind of lose sight of what the priority is, I think we're on the wrong track.
Thomas, do you think this is the right push for the Republican Party to potentially punish signature gathering candidates? You ran in 2020 for governor and gathered signatures. This would mean you would have had your party membership stripped.
Yeah, when you run for office, you use all the tools available to you to try to win a race. And that's what I did when I ran for governor in 2020. But I've always seen the Republican Party as kind of a 3-legged stool, right? Support the elected officials, organize the grassroots, so people feel like they have a voice, whether it's a one-issue person or somebody who just believes in conservative principles, and then fundraise. Fundraising is important to making sure that the party functions. That's the job of the chair, and that should be the focus of the Utah Republican Party. If delegates want to bring forward proposals and have them debated, this is the proper place to do that. I hate sometimes that the whole convention gets branded by one, constitutional amendment or one specific thing, because there's so many issues that people are passionate about. But this is the party of the Big Tent. Bring everything forward. Let's have a vigorous debate. It's fun. And if it's not your jam, elect somebody else to be a delegate.
Is it the Big Tent when we're punishing people when they don't think exactly like we are?
Yeah, you don't want to punish people, but at the same time, you want to allow open dialogue. There are some delegates that feel really strongly about the signature gathering and what it's done to the party. They have a right to their voice, right? And they have the right to believe what they believe. And I think it's worse when you're punishing people, telling them what to believe and shutting them down than it is to just have an open dialogue. Let's just have the dialogue and see where the party is.
I want to take a look at this clip, Rob, from you and Phil Lyman, who debated earlier this week in Washington County, and it kind of addresses SB 54, which is the law that created this dual path to the ballot, right? So let's take a look at this.
Any type of inference that I am not committed to this system and have not done everything in my power to fight for the repeal of SB 54 and strengthening the caucus convention system is not accurate. Am I willing to break the law? No, I'm not.
950,000 members strong. The next largest party is less than a quarter that size. Our problem is not a threat from the Democrats, it's a threat from the Republicans themselves. I look at it again, I'll talk about the elite that call the shots. They don't care. They'll pay money to the Democrats, to the Republicans, wherever. They want to control things. I call it the parasitic elite. They want stadiums. They want benefits. They want to control the water. They want to bring in policies that will give them control over the whole apparatus.
Okay, so you're saying you're not willing to break the law when it comes to the law allows for 2 paths to the ballot. So do you believe that if we strip people of their party membership, that will violate your QPP status and violate state election law?
That question's an excellent question for an attorney to answer. What I will tell you is if you don't like a law, you need to work vigorously to either change the law, and you can do it through litigation or legislation. Those are your 2 mechanisms to change that. The third thing that you can do is to really just change the reality, change the dialogue, change the conversation that's happening. If the Republican Party can get itself to a place where it's standing on its principles, it's well-funded, it has the structure, the data, the volunteers, the support to be a force for good, no candidate is going to ignore going through the party process because they will look at the benefit the party has to provide to them, and that will be so appealing they wouldn't want to circumvent us. So yeah, let's look, and where appropriate, if there's a strategic litigation front that we could take, you could consider it. Certainly we should work through the legislative process and our elected officials, but the things that we have in our control as a party is to build an apparatus that is a force for good. That's where I focus my time and attention.
To that point, you've gotten a lot of criticism for caucus night in 2024. You picked a preference poll where people came in and selected their preference. It ended up being President Donald Trump, right? Thomas, let me have you weigh in. He has faced some criticism, and I know you don't want to disparage your friend in any sort of way.
He's welcome to.
But a 9% turnout when you opened it up to all Republicans is not a great showing. Has he done enough to make caucus convention easy for voters?
Yeah, organizing caucus night is one of the most difficult things. I've done it twice as a twice elected Utah Republican Party chairman. It's very difficult to do. You never can quite predict the turnout, but we've made strides. And again, like I said before, I want to apply the same argument I did before. People love the caucus convention system. They want to go out. And then there's people that don't love it, and they're going to criticize it. And they have the right to criticize it and say, not enough people are participating. It's not indicative of the population. It's antiquated. The meetings weren't run efficiently. And those particular meetings were not run efficiently. I went to one, and I voiced my frustration there, so I'd be disingenuous to not say that. But everybody has the right to their opinion. But I agree with Rob that we do best when we try to rally around common causes, work together, and not try to tear each other apart. We have a really good thing going in Utah with the Utah Republican Party. Utah's one of the best states, best managed states in the country. It's the brightest star on the flag. The worst thing we can do is fight internally. We should rally around our conservative principles and be the banner for conservatism across this country because it needs it more than ever.
A lot of people see the fate of the party, or at least the caucus convention system, in this race. Who wins?
Oh, I'm not one for predictions. I never predict the future, but I did sit down here once with Glenn Mills on the Super Bowl Sunday, and I told him the Broncos were going to win. They were a heavy underdog, and they did.
Okay.
So you know what? My record on predictions.
You're batting 1,000.
Yeah, I'm 1-0. I'm done. I'm
All
out.
right.
Yeah.
We will leave it there. I won't push you on it. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. Rob Axon, of course, chair of the Utah Republican Party, and Thomas Wright, former chair and chair of this year's GOP convention. Thank you, and good luck at your convention.
Thank you.
Well, coming up on Inside Utah Politics, federal land for sale, how your backyard could help fund the budget. Stay with us. Well, a new proposal in Washington could sell off public land in Utah to raise money for the budget. The amendment to the budget was proposed by Utah Representative Celeste Malloy. It would sell off about 11,000 acres of public land between Washington County, Beaver County, and Nevada. Representative Malloy tells us these counties are growing quickly, and this is a way to help them out and fund the government. And the cities we talk to agree.
The biggest driver, I think, of our housing price is the cost of land. I mean, land in the Washington fields is going sometimes for $500,000 an acre. So if you have this federal land that is able to be sold off at lower, cheaper prices, it kind of takes that cost of land out of the equation.
Well, supporters emphasize this land comprises less than 1/3 of 1% of all federal land in Utah, and it's largely adjacent to existing cities. They hope to sell to cities and developers. Meanwhile, environmental groups like the Sierra Club have voiced opposition to new development, urging voters to contact their representatives now that the amendment is attached to the larger budget reconciliation package, which faces an uncertain fate in the Senate. Well, that does it for today's Inside Utah Politics. Don't forget, if you have any local political stories you'd like to see, make sure to reach out. You can email InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow along with me on social media. I'm on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram. Just search for Lindsay on Air, and Lindsay spelled with an A. You can also find our show online in podcast form. You search for Inside Utah Politics wherever you get your podcasts. Well, thanks for being with us, everyone. We will see you next week.